Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.
All right. What's going on, everyone? My name is Alex, and welcome to the Beyond Half Court Podcast, episode uno. This is a little nerve-wracking. I've never actually done a podcast solo dolo. I usually have a friend next to me of some sort, so it's going to be a little bit different trying to figure this out on my own, but I'm looking forward to it. Really a jam-packed episode. Was not expecting to be talking about all the stuff we're going to talk about today, but throughout the week, a lot of stuff has happened with the KD stuff. Got Patrick Beverley trade, lots of different things happening. So before we get into all that, just wanted to shout out some of my social medias in case you wanted to follow me. On my Twitter, my @ is BHCT23. And there you can find a Linktree link to both of my YouTube channels, one for this podcast and the other one for the Beyond Half Court channel, which I will be posting short form content. So if you're interested in that, make sure to sub later this week or next week. I'm recording this on Friday. This is probably going to go up Sunday, probably sometime Wednesday. I'm going to be dropping my top 10 point guards going into next season, and we're going to keep going through the positions: shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. You know the deal. So that's going to be fun. So if you're into that sort of ranking stuff, go sub to the Beyond Half Court channel. At the Linktree link, you can also find links to the Spotify and Apple Podcasts to listen to my podcast. So if you're watching this on YouTube but would rather listen to it on Spotify or Apple Podcast, that's where you need to go. So go ahead, go there if you want to. You don't have to. I'm not going to force you. Anyway, so let's just get straight into it. First thing we wanted to talk about this Kevin Durant stuff. So a little bit of a recap. In case you weren't aware, Kevin Durant asked for a trade. And this was kind of crazy because before it happened, people were kind of speculating that Kyrie may not want to re-sign with the Nets. And this was mainly because of negotiations, not, front office and Kyrie not being on the same page, whether that's Kyrie was asking for more money or at least guaranteed money, and the Nets not really wanting to do that because they weren't sure how comfortable they were with Kyrie being committed to the game of basketball. Maybe that's another conversation we can have for later. But yeah, so that was happening. But if Kyrie wasn't going to re-sign and he was going to go somewhere else, I think it was pretty obvious that KD would want out as well because they both came in at the same time. So if one was going to leave, the other one was probably going to leave as well, unless something happened like, I don't know, LeBron or something also went to the Nets if there's some sort of trade. But that probably wouldn't have happened. I think Kyrie probably would have just walked unless it was a sign and trade, and then KD would have left. So at least I was under the impression that if Kyrie re-signed, then KD would stay. And then I forget exactly when this happened. This was earlier in the summer, but Kyrie, did he re-sign? I forget if he re-signed or just went into his player option, but either way, he was staying. And it's like, okay, cool. So that means we're going to get KD and Kyrie again for one more season, and we'll see how that goes. And then it seemed like almost like a week later, Kevin Durant asked for a trade. And I'll never forget it. I was at the beach and I just freaked out. I was like, what? Kevin Durant asking for a trade? This is insane. Like, this shouldn't be happening, right? So that happens. List of teams come out on, where he prefers to get traded to. It was the Suns and the Heat. Obviously, the Suns, they had Ayton, the whole Ayton situation. And then they also had Mikal Bridges. So those were two pieces, that you could throw in, plus some picks. So that was kind of, that was understandable why, the Suns may be a good trade destination for Kevin Durant. But then the Heat were a little weird because, they have Jimmy Butler and they have Bam. I don't think those two were going to be put into the trade package. I feel like if the Heat were going to trade for them or trade for KD, if they were going to trade for KD, they, probably wouldn't want one of them to leave. They would want all three to be together. So, I mean, if your main centerpiece is going to be Tyler Hero, I don't know if that's what the Nets would be looking for out of a KD trade. It definitely isn't better than what the Suns were offering as well. So we had that. And then kind of just the whole summer, it was just, Heat. It was the Suns. Yet other teams. People were talking about the Pelicans, maybe like Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, that sort of thing. And then we get to the point where things start slowing down. Not really much is being said about the whole Kevin Durant situation. And then all of a sudden, it's been told that KD has talked to the front office and he is giving them an ultimatum. It's trade me or you got to fire Sean Marks and Steve Nash. Now, this was crazy because, one, I don't really think he thought that one out. I don't know. I don't think that was the best way to go about things, in my opinion. I feel like either way, like they were going to keep you or they were going to trade you. It's too close to training camp and stuff for them to not only fire their GM to find another one, but they would also be firing their head coach and trying to find another head coach. And it's obvious that wasn't going to happen. So, I mean, the ultimatum was, okay, yeah, no, we'll trade you. And then we saw the guy for the Nets, I completely forget his name. Excuse me for that, but he had came out on Twitter and pretty much said, "Yeah, we stick by our front office and our coaches. We're gonna stick by their side." It's like, okay, cool. So they're gonna trade KD. Nice. Not anything we didn't know before, but thank you for telling us, right? And then recently, they all got together, the whole band, Sean Marks, Steve Nash, KD, and others. They got together, and KD's going to stay now. Now, it's really interesting because I remember just having conversations with friends or, seeing conversations on Twitter, NBA Twitter, the whole deal. But, when you look at the conversations, it was always, oh, he's going to be traded. I don't think anyone really expected him to end up staying. But when you really think about it, I don't think he was ever going to be traded. And there's a couple reasons for that. And the first one that I want to go over is just like the trade destinations. Obviously, there were some trade packages that would be worthwhile for KD. We'll talk about the Boston Celtics one first. Jaylen Brown. I think the original deal was Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart. And then maybe like another player like Grant Williams and some picks. But yeah, so we had that, but obviously the Celtics weren't going to do that because that was too much. And then again with the Heat, it the one thing with the Heat too is they actually couldn't trade Bam, or sorry, they couldn't technically trade. Yeah, they couldn't technically trade Bam because I forget the exact rule, but Bam and Ben Simmons have like the same like contract, and there's some rule that their contracts can't be on the same team. I had never heard of this before until then, but that happened. So unless Ben Simmons was going to be in that KD trade for Bam, then that wasn't going to happen. And obviously Jimmy Butler's not going to be traded, so that just wasn't going to happen. Obviously, Tyler Hero is not the guy you want out of a KD trade. Not saying he's bad. I'm just saying there's better options like a Jaylen Brown. Who wouldn't want Jaylen Brown over Tyler Hero? I don't think that's a hot take. So we had that. And then with the Suns, DeAndre Ayton was obviously going to be a part of that. But then he signed his the Suns matched his contract, which now limits his trade date because now they have to wait to trade him. So if KD was going to get traded to the Suns, the Nets would have gotten less if they were going to do it right away. They would have had to wait, until like January, February to trade. And at that point, I think they would have already found a trade. So then the Suns don't, really work out. I'm going to let me pull up Basketball Reference real quick, and we are just going to go through the teams. We're just going to do this. Okay. So we're at Basketball Reference. We're just going to click the team. So obviously we just went through the Miami Heat. If I click them, they are not a match. They are not going to work. The Wizards, obviously I think KD is from DC, but let's be honest, the Wizards don't have anything that the Nets want unless it's Beal, and they're not going to trade Beal. So we're just going to move on from that. The Raptors is something that could work, but the Nets would want Scotty Barnes, and they had already said they do not want to trade Scotty. So that just wasn't going to work. Philadelphia, this is actually another place that could have potentially worked if you did Tobias Harris and I guess Tyrese Maxey at that point. But again, there's better options than Tyrese Maxey, even though I am a big believer in Tyrese Maxey, and I think he could definitely be an all-star or at least like a borderline all-star, kind of like a CJ McCollum. He's honestly kind of that right now. He's pretty close to CJ, in my opinion, in terms of what he provides to the game. So unless the Nets were really high on Tyrese, I don't honestly think they would have taken that. Orlando, no. We should also take into account that he would probably want to be in a winning situation. So that's why Orlando's a no. The Knicks, he already chose the Nets over the Knicks. So it would be actually hilarious if he decided that he wanted to go to the Knicks. That infamous "you want to go to the Knicks" video, where the whole Bing Bong video came from. Yeah, that guy would have been brought up again on NBA Twitter for sure. But yeah, Knicks, definitely not. The Bucks, I really don't think he would have joined the Bucks. That would have been insane if he joined the Bucks, just because, people hated on him for, losing to the Warriors and then joining them. So if 2 years later, after losing in Game 7 to the Bucks, if he just went to the Bucks, I don't think that would have worked out. Also, they don't really have a lot of assets other than Giannis. Obviously, Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday are really good, but they're in their 30s, so if the Nets are going to want something, they're going to want something for the long term that just wasn't going to work for them. Atlanta, obviously, Trae Young is there. Trae Young would not be a part of a package. John Collins would probably be the best, asset out of that. But similar to like a Tyler Hero, I don't think that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a Jaylen Brown, Brandon Ingram sort of thing. So I don't think they would. I'm not going to click them, but I don't think they would work. Indy, they're not winning. Cleveland, again, they're rebuilding, but they have some great pieces. But I honestly think they would rather stay put with their big three of Jared Allen, Mobley, and Garland. I don't think they would want to trade in any of those guys. And outside of that, I don't think they really have anything that the Nets want. So we'll take them out. Boston definitely could have been on the table, so we'll keep them out. Obviously, Brooklyn, they're not going to trade with themselves. The Bulls, I guess potentially if you wanted to do a Zach LaVine trade, but let's be honest, they're not trading Zach LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan, again, much like the whole Milwaukee thing, he's in his 30s. They want something more long term. That probably wasn't going to happen. They had other assets as well, like Lonzo, but Lonzo is injury prone right now. He's had a lot of setbacks. Don't know if they would want that necessarily. And then they have Kobe White. Yeah, not Kobe White. Kobe White is not what we're looking for. So we're gonna take the Bulls off. The Hornets. The Hornets, maybe, I guess, if Miles Bridges wasn't dealing with his legal stuff. But once that happened, they were definitely out of the running. Detroit, they're rebuilding. I don't really think they're looking for Kevin Durant. And outside of Cade, I don't know and Jaden Ivey, I don't know if they have anything worthwhile for trade, and I don't think they trade either of those guys. So there we go. We come out of the East, and there's two potential spots. And it's really just one, because I really don't think the John Collins trade would be good. So now I'm just going to take that out now, and we're left with Boston. Memphis actually became, later in this whole KD trade saga, Memphis did become a team to look out for sure. But they did not want to give up Bane or Jaren Jackson. And that's what they would have had to give up. And because they don't want to, they are out. Now the Nuggets, again, another team that kind of came out as a sleeper team. I'm assuming they would have had to trade one or both of Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr. I feel like, as a Nuggets fan, I think it would be cool. It's a cool idea to think of, Kevin Durant and two-time MVP Jokic to be on the same team. I think that'd be a really good fit, but I don't know if they would do that, just because I feel like when you when all three of those guys, Michael Porter Jr., Jokic, and Murray, are healthy, they made it to the conference finals. It was in the bubble. Yes, I understand that. But I don't know. I don't think they would do that, honestly. I think they would be okay just keeping the core together. So I don't think Denver is a good one. Dallas, it's just Luka as their trade asset. No one else, really, unless they want Spencer Dinwiddie. So they're out of there. Minnesota, they have Cat and they have Anthony Edwards. But outside of that, that's really it. And I don't think, unless they traded Cat, I don't think they would trade Ant. So I don't know. I guess technically, I actually haven't even thought of the Timberwolves. But they also got Rudy Gobert as well. So they ended up getting Rudy Gobert. They traded all those picks to get Rudy Gobert. So actually, I think just because of that, they wouldn't have enough. Because yeah, you could trade Cat, but you don't have any more draft capital anymore. So yeah, I think the Timberwolves are out of that. Pelicans was the sleeper team. But then, I had mentioned that Brandon Ingram would be a good, piece in that trade. You could put in Herb Jones, some picks. I actually think that'd be a good trade package, very similar to the Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen Brown and Brandon Ingram are pretty close in value, or at least, where they're at right now as players. Maybe you might think Jaylen Brown's better. I can definitely see that. I would probably agree with you. But yeah, Pelicans said, we're not trading Brandon Ingram, so they're out. Because unless they're trading Zion, which they're not, then yeah, it just won't work out. Golden State, now they definitely, if we're being honest here, they had one of, if not the best trade package for Kevin Durant. There's no doubt in my mind that that's the case. But just from what Bob Myers was saying, kind of like, oh, we want to run it back with our team. Obviously, the Warriors just won a championship. We want to run it back. We want to give these guys, a fair shot to run it back. It just made it pretty obvious that they weren't going to trade for KD because he said that after he requested a trade, and that was kind of like the answer to a question about him possibly considering a trade for KD. So I think just because of that, Warriors are off the table, but that's not because they don't have the package. It's just because they're not doing the trade because they just won the championship. Now, if they don't win, they may do the trade. I'm not sure. Kevin Durant to OKC, that would be hilarious if that happened. I don't think they would get Shea in that deal. They probably would have gotten Dort. Dort had just signed that extension. Maybe a pick, maybe that number 2 pick that got them Chet. I have no idea. There's honestly a lot of things they can do. They have so many picks. They have so much draft capital. It's definitely something they could have technically done, but I don't think OKC, again, even if they trade for KD, I don't think they're in that winning position. So I think they're out. The Lakers, outside of AD and LeBron, I don't see that happening. And I think a LeBron AD fit is better than a KD LeBron fit. Even technically, KD's better than AD, so they should be better. I just think the fit between LeBron and AD is better, and I think the Lakers would rather roll with that. So I think they were out. The Clippers, they had Paul George and Kawhi, obviously. But outside of them, there's not really any trade assets again. There's nothing worthwhile for the Nets to take. So the Clippers are out. Now we got Phoenix. This was one of them until it wasn't when DeAndre Ayton got his contract matched by the Suns. So they were out unless later on they decided to trade him. Blazers, again, if it's Dame, maybe, Anthony Simons would probably be a trade asset, but similar to Tyler Hero, probably not enough. But it's an interesting one for sure. Sacramento, no. Spurs, no. Utah, they got, before Gobert, maybe. But once Gobert left, there's just no way that the Jazz are going to do it. And then Houston, no, just because even if they trade for him, they're not in a winning situation. And that's where KD would most likely want to be. He would want to be in a winning situation. So, again, we look at the list, and we're left with one team, the Boston Celtics. And it's Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart and another player and a bunch of picks. but they don't want to trade Jaylen Brown. It's too much. But because they go down, now the Nets don't want to do it because they don't think they're getting enough. So again, the Nets are out. So after looking at all that, and I know that was really tiring, and I know that was a lot, to digest, but you know, I just don't think that a Kevin Durant trade was ever going to happen. There's just when you go through the teams and you go through the situations, there's just no way that both teams in a KD trade were going to be happy. Either the Nets were going to be happy because they're getting a bunch of assets and they're set up for the future, but the other team is upset because now they don't have as many assets and they honestly haven't really moved the needle as much. Like when you think about it, like even if a Jaylen Brown and Kevin Durant trade happened with that one that I had proposed, or the Nets had technically proposed, and I'm just kind of repeating it, but it was Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, another player like Grant Williams, and a bunch of picks. It's like you're losing a lot of what made you guys so great. And yes, Kevin Durant's a great player, but it obviously doesn't make you worse of a team, but does it make you that? Just don't think so. So, if they were going to say, you know what, we'll give you Jaylen Brown, but and some picks, but we're not going to give you any other players, the Nets aren't going to be happy. They're not getting what they want in terms of the assets, so they just weren't going to do it. So, I think when you just look through, all the trade destinations that Katie wanted or even didn't want, because I don't think it was explicitly said that he wanted to go to the Pelicans, but even like a Pelicans trade, like it just wasn't going to happen. I don't think the Pelicans or any other team would be willing to give up all these assets just to get Kevin Durant and ultimately not move the needle to be a better team. I just don't think that would have happened at all. So that's kind of like my whole take on the thing. I'm happy this whole debacle of the Nets is over. I was tired of hearing about Kevin Durant wanting to be traded and seeing all these awful KD trades on Twitter. I was just tired of it. I did not want to see it anymore. So I'm happy it's over. So let's move on to the next piece of news. And we want to talk about the Patrick Beverley trade. So the Lakers have finally done something, but it's not a trade for Westbrook. As much as the Lakers need to get rid of Westbrook, they haven't done it yet. But they were able to get Patrick Beverley, and if I remember the trade correctly, it was Stanley Johnson and Talen Horton-Tucker, THD, and all they got was Pat Bev. I don't think they got anything else out of that. Now, I like this trade. I like this trade for both teams, honestly. Like, just to quickly go over the Jazz, right now they obviously have Donovan Mitchell, and they're not too much in a rush to trade him from what it seems, but they're also kind of leaning in towards that, hey, we're probably going to rebuild soon, so let's get some assets. So even though they weren't able to get a first round pick out of the Lakers, because the Lakers just don't have much anyway, they only have 2 and they're not going to give them up. They were able to get a young player, so I think that's pretty good for Patrick Beverley. They obviously got Stanley Johnson, who proved himself last season to be a nice big defensive guy. Don't know how much he'd be playing for the Jazz, honestly, but he could be playing for them a little bit. He may have improved from last season, getting, re-energized, maybe improving his three-point shot. I think that would definitely do him wonders in the NBA. But yeah, I like the trade for the Jazz. It's a young player. THT will probably have some more opportunity, be able to show off his skill set a little bit more. The little skill set he did have, or at least shown at the Lakers, wasn't something too desirable, but who knows, maybe with more opportunity with Utah, he could develop into a better player. Now for the Lakers, I definitely like to trade for them as well. Patrick Beverley is definitely an upgrade over Talen Horton-Tucker. He's a better fit in general. He's a better defensive player, probably a equal or better playmaker than THT, and a better shooter. If I remember correctly, Patrick Beverley is a career 38% three-point shooter. I do think, though, last season was his worst three-point shooting season. So take that as you will. But, just in terms of what Patrick Beverley, brings to the table, just a better player than THT, better fit. So it's a good trade for the Lakers, and you didn't have to give up a first round pick. I wouldn't want to give up a first round pick for Beverley, so good job for them for not falling for a trap at all. If there was a trap, they avoided it, so good for you. Um, Also, secret winner in this trade, it's all of us. It's all us NBA fans because now we get to see how a Westbrook and Beverly fit actually pans out. For those of you who don't know, they don't like each other. Not one bit. They don't like each other at all. And it's going to be interesting to say the least how this might possibly work. I know a lot of people go towards just their history with each other. We go back, forget the year Westbrook had it was his first, knee injury, and Pat Bev went for a loose ball but landed into his leg. Whether you think it was, intentional or not, I don't think that really matters, but it happened. And then you have the whole, oh, he's running around doing nothing. He's tricking y'all quote from Westbrook, an absolute certified hood classic quote from an NBA player that's going to be remembered for decades. Yeah, they have a lot of history together. So that's definitely one way to think about it in terms of like chemistry. But, in terms of fit on the court, it's going to be interesting because I know reports were saying that the Lakers were looking towards Austin Reeves to being their starting two, but now that they have Pat Bev, do they play Westbrook and Beverly together? Does Beverly come off the bench and Austin Reeves starts, but closing lineups, Pat Bev is at the two. How is that going to work? I think that they can actually work pretty good together, I guess. I don't think, at least it's not going to be a bad fit. Like if Westbrook and THT were on the same court, it's obviously not a good fit because they both can't shoot and they both have to they're both productive when they have the ball in their hands. So that just wasn't going to work because THT wasn't going to get the ball in his hands. So he becomes almost useless on offense unless he's cutting. Like I said before, Beverly is a good 3-point shooter. So, if you put him at that 2 guard, he doesn't have to have the ball in his hands and can still be an effective corner shooter. So obviously that's a good fit. And when you look back at the Timberwolves year that Beverly had, he was playing next to D'Angelo Russell, who's a point guard. So I feel like if those two could, and Anthony Edwards, I mean, if all three of those guys could be at the court at the same time, obviously they're all good shooters, and Westbrook's not. But just being able to coexist with a guard who can have the ball in his hand, like he did in Minnesota, I think he could also do that with LA. So I'm actually really looking forward to it. Stupid car blinding its lights in my eyes. For those of you watching on the YouTube channel, you'd see me burning my eyes from sunlight. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of all works out. Does this, is this a playoff push move? Obviously, I think it is. How much better does it make the Lakers? I'm not too sure. It definitely made them better. But yeah, I still think the Lakers are screwed. I remember doing playoff predictions last season and had the Lakers at like 4th seed. I was like, yeah, I don't know if this move is going to be the move for Westbrook. I don't know if it's going to click right away, but I think by the end of the season, it's going to be good and they're going to figure it out. And then we got to the end of the season and they didn't make the play-in. So we'll see what happens. Do they make the play-in? Is that our expectations are so low that we're just hoping that the Lakers make the play-in? That'd be hilarious. That is hilarious because I think that is the expectation, is they at least make the play-in, which is just crazy to think about because they had a team with LeBron and Anthony Davis. When they're both healthy, they're both, top 5, top 10 players in the NBA. So yeah, man, shout out to the Lakers for finally making a move. Oh, another thing I kind of want to add is maybe this Beverly trade actually, is an early sign that they are going to trade Westbrook. They may just say, hey, Beverly's a better fit. We want LeBron back at her point guard position. So again, like Westbrook is not a good fit with us. So we're going to trade him. And I think the most common trade at this point is, either 1 or 2 first-round picks and then Westbrook for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. So that would, if that trade were to happen for whatever reason, Beverly, Buddy Hield, LeBron, Anthony Davis, Miles Turner, 5-man lineup. That's a pretty good lineup. The depth is still a problem. Also, I feel like the perimeter defense is also a problem. Even though obviously AD, Turner, Beverly, they're all good players, but again, like, they don't have depth. So once those guys go on the bench, what's going to happen? They're going to get outscored, and it's going to be, there's, no matter what they do, I feel there's going to be a big problem, and it's either going to be shooting, or it's going to be defense, or it's going to be both. So, if that's the case, then I mean, it still makes them a better team. So if they do end up doing that trade, I think they would do it because I think they know they don't have that big of a window left to win with LeBron, even though he just signed his $2 million. What was it? 2,140,000 or something like that. It was a lot. I think he's going to be getting paid like $50 or $60 million a year, or 122 years. So he's getting paid 60 a year. That sounds about right. I don't actually remember. It was a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I think their window is closing. So if they really wanted to go all in, I think they would trade those picks for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. Long term, obviously, it's not going to be very good for them, but I think it definitely makes them a better team. And it's just going to be interesting to see what happens. I know I've been saying it's going to be interesting. The Lakers are just an interesting team. Even though we kind of already know what's going to happen, it's still interesting because anything could happen. I mean, maybe Westbrook magically becomes a 40% 3-point shooter. Who knows? I actually do know that's probably not going to happen, because if it was going to happen, it would have already happened. So that's it for Lakers talk. We talked about the KD stuff. Again, for those watching on YouTube, if you are enjoying on what you're listening, then make sure you guys sub and turn on post notifications so that you know when I post. And then for those of you on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I'm uploading every Sunday. So if you want to listen to my voice, that's when you can expect new episodes every Sunday. Last thing I wanted to go over, nothing news related, but I did want to go over some of my expectations for next season. I know we are getting kind of close, not really close, but close enough to where I think I can do this. We're going to go over who I think kind of the best teams are, surprise teams, any teams that I think will kind of go over expectations, any disappointing teams, and ultimately who do I think is going to win the chip, even though we're not even close to the season starting and anything could happen. Who's going to win? Let's start off with who I think the best teams in the leagues are going to be. So to start off, I think the Bucks, no doubt in my mind, are a team to watch out for. Obviously, they lost in the second round, but they didn't have Middleton. I think if they had Middleton in that series against the Celtics, I think the Bucks would have won. And ultimately, I think they would have won. At least they would have at least gone to the finals for a fact. I know that, because they would have ended up playing the Heat. And if you guys remember the last time the Bucks played the Heat, they swept them. So, I'm not saying maybe a sweep would happen again, but I definitely think the Bucks would have their number from the time Jimmy Butler whooped them. What was it, 2019 or 2020? I think it was 2020. It was 2020, right? I don't know. But you guys know what I'm talking about. For those of you know, if you know, you know. So yeah, Bucks definitely would have made the finals or at least won it. So Bucks are a team to watch out for. Guess we'll just go through the East now, since I brought up the Bucks. Philadelphia, I think they're probably the second best team in the East. Obviously KD is back with the Nets. I think a lot of people believe that Kevin Durant is the best player in the league, or at least one of them, and he on his own could put them into that finals conversation. They honestly just haven't shown me enough in these past 2 to 3 years to have confidence in them. So I would rather bank on James Harden um, coming back from his hamstring injury and performing a little bit better this season than he did in that second half of the season in the playoffs. Um, a big three of Tyrese Maxey, Harden, and Embiid, and then your fourth option being Tobias Harris. That's definitely a scary team. And I also like their pickups of PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker is going to be a great piece for them. They need a guy who's just going to get down and dirty. I think they kind of missed that with Jimmy Butler a little bit. So yeah, that's a great piece for them. And honestly, having PJ Tucker, it just means less Niang minutes. I am a part of Niang gang, but I gotta be honest, he's just not. He's not that good. He's a good 3-point shooter. I'll give you that. But PJ's also a good 3-point shooter, and he showed a lot too with Miami. The way Miami was running him, he was doing a lot more stuff off the dribble. Not like obviously he's not tween hezzy pull up splash on people, but he's putting the ball on the floor and he's going up and he's shooting floaters. It was respectable. It was as someone who's not a avid PJ Tucker watcher or fan, so to speak. I do like PJ Tucker, but I'm not watching. I wasn't watching Miami Heat games to go watch PJ Tucker. It was definitely impressive what I saw. It was different from back in when he's playing for Houston and she's just sitting in the corner. It's definitely different. It's definitely something that I respected from him. So hopefully Philly does something a little bit similar, allows him to just be something other than just a 3-point shooter. Obviously, him being a 3-point shooter is definitely a great thing for them. So I feel like Philly is another team to watch out for. Cleveland. Actually, I'm not going to talk about Cleveland yet. I want to talk about Boston. Obviously, Boston just went to the finals. They added Brogdon. Great move for them. I like it because there's a lot of times in the playoffs when they were playing Pritchard, and Pritchard had, I forget what game it was, but he had one game where he just went off, and that was good for them. But then outside of that, like he was giving good minutes for when he was on the court. But now if you have Brogdon on the court rather than Pritchard, I think that definitely puts you in a better spot. And they obviously have the same players. They haven't moved anyone. Everyone's going to get better. I think Derek White will play a little bit better because he was a mid-season trade acquisition for them. So maybe he becomes a little bit of a 3-point shooter for them. I think even if he doesn't, I think he's still very good for them, defensively and just playmaking wise. I think, he's definitely going to find minutes in the playoffs. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But if he becomes, a slightly better 3-point shooter, that's obviously a plus. So Boston's going to be there for sure. The Nets are going to net, dude. They have Katie and Kyrie. I think, they have to get out of the first round. If they don't get out of the first round, then they're an unserious team, in my opinion. But they should definitely be able to get out of the first round and make it to the second. I don't know if they make it to the conference finals because, again, like you're going to have to go through the Celtics or the Bucks or the Sixers. I would take those teams over them. So I don't think they make it to the conference finals, but they definitely get to the second round. So shout out to the Nets. And I think my sleeper team that I'm going to go with, coming out of the East is Cleveland. Before all these injuries, Jared Allen had an injury, and I believe Mobley had an injury as well. They were kind of in that 5 to 6 seed spot range, but then because of the injuries, it had fallen down, and then they got into the play-in, and then they had to play the Nets, and obviously the Nets are, at least last season were better than the Cavs, but it was still a very close game. The Cavs were very in that game into the fourth quarter. And Garland played really well. Everyone played well on it. Again, it was a close game. It could have gone their way, but it just didn't. But, coming into this season, I think Mobley's going to take a huge step up, Jared Allen, coming off an all-star season. I don't think he gets worse. If you don't think he gets better, then that's fine. But still being, an all-star caliber center, I think that definitely helps you out. Garland became a first-time all-star. You will see him in my top 10 point guards if you go sub to the Beyond Half Court channel on YouTube. Quick little plug. Self-promotion never hurt no one. But yeah, no, like he averaged 21 and 8. And again, without those injuries, I think they would have stayed a higher seed. And, I think coming into next season, as long as health permits, I don't see why they couldn't get to that 4th or 5th seed. Like if you think about it 2 years ago, the Knicks and the Hawks were there in that 4th and 5th seed. So I don't see why they couldn't make it to that spot. Anyway, moving on to the West, we obviously got the Warriors. The Warriors are going to make it. I don't think I need to explain that too much. Man, the West is so interesting. There's like so many teams that I think could realistically make it to the conference finals because obviously you have the Warriors. I think the Warriors are the team to beat. But, man, there's like 4 or 5 teams here. It's like the teams that I have in mind are the Grizzlies, the Nuggets, the Mavericks, the Suns. Those could be a team. So that's 4 teams right there. But then you have 2. Dude, even the Clippers. The Clippers have a chance. That's 5 teams. And then you have kind of some sleeper teams, I believe. You have the Timberwolves and the Pelicans. The Pelicans for sure as well, because with what they showed me in that first round against the Suns, making that a 6-game series, that's insane to me. And that was without Zion. So I think if you add Zion into that mix, makes them so interesting. So interesting. I am going to try to watch almost all the Pelicans games because I need to watch some Zion. I miss some Zion Williamson in my life. But, man, that's going to be an exciting team to watch. And then the Timberwolves, I'll talk about the Timberwolves later about, my expectations. But, maybe not as, I don't feel as confident in them as the Pelicans. But obviously adding Rudy Gobert definitely changes things for them. So maybe they do get out of the first round and make it to the second round. And then who knows, maybe they're just better than what I expect. And they could potentially make it out of the conference finals. But honestly, I think it's between these 5 teams right here to be that second best team. You got the Grizzlies, the Nuggets, the Mavericks, the Clippers, and the Suns. Suns obviously disappointed a lot in that second round series against the Mavs, but they're still very dangerous. They're probably going to be re-energized to try to prove themselves again, even though they won a bunch of games last season. I don't think that's enough for them. Every time I think of the Suns right now, I keep thinking about the winners work video when they had won like a road game or a home game, and then they're all just like working out in the back after a game, even though they won. I'll always remember that clip just because people posted it once they lost to the Mavs in that game 7. It was so funny. But yeah, it's like they won 64 games, so I think you kind of have to have them in that spot. And then you have the Grizzlies. They obviously have John Morant. They made it to the second round, and they played the Warriors. So that's definitely another team to be scared of as well. The Nuggets. Man, I feel like a lot of people sleep on the Nuggets, and I know I'm a Nuggets fan, so you might think I'm biased, but I understand maybe a slight concern about, the health of Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray. But again, if health permits, I don't see why that team with that core who made the conference finals before, I don't see why they couldn't make it, there again. I just don't, especially since it's been, or it would be, you get the playoff time. It'd be 3 years since, or at least 3 seasons since they had last went to the conference finals, and Jokic is definitely better. So, assuming that Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray come back healthy and they play, maybe not at the bubble level, but, maybe somewhere remotely close to it. I think having a 2-time MVP who is better now than he was then, I think that kind of makes up for it. I don't see why they couldn't make the conference finals. Um, the Clippers, obviously, the health thing is a concern. Paul George had another injury last season. Kawhi was out all season. He's still kind of dealing with that quad thing. Um, and the injury he had, isn't he coming off an ACL as well, if I remember that correctly? So it'd be interesting to see how he comes back for that. His game really wasn't, he's an athletic guy. He's very sneaky athletic, but he doesn't really use his athleticism towards his advantage. He's very kind of like play at his own pace. So, maybe it affects him defensively, but offensively, maybe it just doesn't make that much of a difference. And maybe he still performs the way he does. So, definitely health is a concern, but, again, assuming everyone's healthy, I think they're definitely a team to watch out for. Dallas just made the conference finals. And if you have Luka on your team, I mean, he's shown to be an excellent elite playoff performer. He always, every year he's been in the playoffs, he always overperforms his regular season stature. So, I don't see why he wouldn't do it again. And put up a fight against someone like the Warriors. And then Grizzlies, I think I already said the Grizzlies, but to just go over it again, they have Ja. Ja is really good. And Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., all those guys, they're all going to improve. They're all going to get better. One thing I think that would really make me certain on the Grizzlies is if Jaren Jackson Jr. can play a little bit more consistently. I think a part of that inconsistency is his foul trouble. He really, really likes to foul people, falls into a lot of traps, always kind of jumps, and he's Defensive Player of the Year, so you kind of want him trying to make those plays, but also sometimes I think he gets a little excited. So I think he could play more consistently if he wasn't in so much foul trouble. So I think if he kind of tones that back, he's definitely improved from his first couple seasons in the league. But if he really nails that part down, I definitely believe in the Grizzlies a little bit more. So that's kind of like who I think the best teams are going to be. Those are definitely teams I'm going to be watching all season. For most surprising team, honestly, I don't know, man. There's not really a lot of teams that I think have low expectations when I think they could kind of exceed low expectations. I feel like everyone is pretty properly rated, and that goes for disappointing as well. But I guess if I had to choose a surprise team, man, I don't know. Maybe I just go Denver just because, they've lost in the first round, or they lost in the first round last season, but, then they got swept in the second round against the Suns the previous season in 2021. So maybe people aren't just realizing that they could potentially be better. Just because, again, it's been a while since Jamal and Michael Porter Jr. have played. But I'd probably pick them as a surprise team. But really, I don't. They're not a surprise team in my opinion. But if I had to choose one, it'd probably be them. I feel like everyone is kind of properly rated right now. Disappointing team, again, it's the same thing. I feel like most people are going to play towards expectations. That's kind of my expectation. But if I had to choose one disappointing team, I think it would be the Timberwolves, and I know I had kind of mentioned them in a team to watch. I think they're going to be a really good regular season team, but when it gets to the playoffs, I just don't know if Rudy Gobert is going to survive. And I think Rudy Gobert is definitely in a better situation just individually, because when you look at what was happening when he was on the Jazz, there's a lot of bad perimeter defense from Gobert. And I actually don't think he's like bad. I think he's better than some people would probably say he is. But, when he gets switched out onto a guard, or when like a team like the Clippers was going 5 out with Batum at the 5, that was really bad for him. And I think one thing people aren't realizing is that the Jazz really don't have any, or they didn't have any defensive pieces to surround Gobert. So it kind of left Gobert stuck in a hard spot. And they really didn't do anything to help him defensively. I feel like they kind of just put him out there, and he was just anchoring one of the best defenses in the league, at least in the regular season, obviously. Um, but I think you go to the Timberwolves, there's definitely some better defenders. Obviously, you wish you had Beverley. But Anthony Edwards, I think he is a pretty good defender. He could just get better because he's young. D'Angelo Russell, he's improved as a defender. When he was on the Nets and the Lakers, he was a god-awful defender. He was definitely one of my most overrated players in the league, just because people love the scoring, but his defense to me was just so bad that like it kind of counteracted it in a way. Now his offense is kind of taking a step back and his defense is taking a step up. So I actually think he's kind of leaning towards that underrated sort of side as a player. Torian Prince, who actually knows if he plays this season because he is in some legal trouble, having to do with drugs, if you weren't aware. So we'll see what happens with him. I think Cat is not a good defender. Let me say that. He's not bad. It's actually hard. I think it's hard to be a really bad defender. I feel like you can only be a bad defender depending on like your physical attributes. Like someone like a young Steph Curry or like Trae Young now, even it's just like they're so small, right? But Cat's still big. He's mobile. He could definitely, he's putting in effort. You can tell he's putting an effort on defense. Is it elite or great? Probably not, but he's not the greatest, but I still think the Timberwolves have more defensively to surround Gobert. So, I think he'd have a better time in the playoffs when teams are more likely to go 5 out on him. But yeah, I'm just a little concerned about that. That's probably my biggest concern is just how's that going to work. Also, how is the Gobert and Cat dynamic going to work? Obviously, Cat can shoot the ball. So he doesn't have to worry about, crowding the paint with Gobert, but our team's just gonna again like not care about Rudy Gobert. I don't know. Rudy Gobert is just a big question mark to me. I think people overhate him. I think what he brings to the game is really valuable, but I feel like sometimes people overvalue it just because when you get to the playoffs, it doesn't really matter as much because his flaws kind of outweigh what he's really good at, which is protecting the rim. Rudy Gobert is going to be an interesting fit. Definitely a team I'd watch. I think they will win a lot in the regular season. Gobert is just, even if there is no defensive pieces, he's going to be an anchor to one of the best. And that's definitely something that the Timberwolves need. I think they have enough offensive power. Defense is kind of the one thing they needed, and they'll win, a lot of games in the regular season, I feel. But I just don't know how it's going to look in the playoffs. And lastly, before we wrap things up, just wanted to talk about who I think is going to win it all. So I guess if I had to choose a team from one from each conference to go head to head, it'd probably be the Warriors and the Bucks. That's who I would take. And when it comes to who I think would win, it's really interesting that they both play completely different styles of basketball. But the Bucks are just really good defensively. The Celtics were too. Man, I don't know. I think the Warriors would win again, honestly. But, I don't know, though. Because now that I think about it, it's like the Warriors don't have the depth. Or they have, like, good depth, I guess. But it's not as good as last season when they won. The Bucks are going to be kind of hungry to prove themselves again, I feel. Just with Giannis coming back. I don't know. I really like Giannis. I think I'd be rooting for the Bucks, but man, I don't think you could ever just doubt the Warriors. So I think the Warriors would beat the Bucks, but it definitely wouldn't be close. I think it'd be a 6 or 7 game series for sure. And I think the Bucks would put up a fight. A Draymond Green versus Giannis matchup, it'd be very interesting to see how Draymond Green covers Giannis. But yeah, that's all we're gonna really talk about today. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to my voice. I actually can't believe it. Right now, we're at 54 minutes. So I've been talking for a very long time, and I need a break. Um, but yeah, for those of you watching on YouTube, if you enjoyed, hit the like button, sub, post notifications, do all that. Uploading every Sunday. You can also go to my link tree, and if you want to listen to my stuff on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you can find it there. I also have another YouTube channel. Check it out. I'm going to be posting my top 10 point guards on Wednesday. So if you're interested in seeing who I think are the top 10 point guards, go sub and turn on post notifications. And if you want to keep updated on what I'm doing and what I'm talking about, you can always follow me on Twitter at BHCT23. Again, thank you guys for listening. Really looking forward to keep on doing this. If you ever have any questions that you would want to bring to my attention that I could answer on a pod, just put them in the comments below, or you can tweet them at me. You can DM me, whatever. DMs are open. But yeah, that's it. Again, for like the third or fourth time, thank you for listening. I'll see y'all next time.